And again, this is Bhagavatam 10:64-35 on August 10th, 2025 in Hillsborough. Brahmaswam, a Brahmana's property, Duranugnatam, not given proper permission. Bhuktam, enjoys. Hanti, destroys. Three, Purusham, persons. Prasaya, by force. 2, but, balat, resorting to external power of the government, etc. Bhuktam, enjoyed. Dasa, 10, Purvan, previous. Dasha, 10, Aparam, subsequent. BBT translation. If a person, this is Krishna talking to his sons. If a person enjoys a Brahmana's property without receiving due permission, that property destroys 3 generations of his family. But if he takes it by force or gets the government or other outsiders to help him usurp it, then 10 generations of his ancestors and 10 generations of his descendants are all destroyed. BBT purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Tri Purusha refers to oneself, one's sons, and one's grandsons. That's also Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Brahmaswam dur anujatam ti purusham prasayatu balad bhuktam dasya purvam dasa param. If a person enjoys a Brahmana's property without receiving due permission, that property destroys 3 generations of his family. But if he takes it by force or gets the government or other outsiders to help him, something wrong with the mic, to help him usurp it, then 10 generations of his ancestors and 10 generations of his are all destroyed. So, this is about stealing. What happens when you steal, especially from a Brahmana? And by the way, stealing can be very subtle. I mean, how this can affect 10 previous generations who are now in other places. Stealing is, it's not just stealing gross things. There's also subtle things that one can steal. And the laws pertaining to theft are very intense. This is pretty intense, right? 3 generations, 10 generations. So I thought this is related to some empirical research on universal moral principles. So sociologists, in studying various societies all over the world, have identified that all societies have 5 basic moral principles in common, although these moral principles are interpreted differently in different societies, and the emphasis among the 5 can also differ, and that's purity, authority, fairness, community, and harm. Now, stealing from a Brahmana violates all 5 of these. And so the consequences are very serious. It undercuts all the moral underpinnings of society. So why do we care? If society is not safe and secure, spiritual life is very hard to execute. It's not that it's impossible, ahoitukiya pratiyata. Bhakti cannot be impeded by anything, but still it's very difficult if people are feeling insecure and unsafe. And it's also very important to be satisfied with our own quota. That's something that's both part of our sadhana and also evidence that we're actually in Krishna consciousness. So in order to please the Lord, we have to be satisfied with our quota. And if we are pleasing the Lord, part of that evidence is that we're going to be satisfied with our quota. We're not going to be stealing. Yes. And if we're not satisfied with our quota, especially in regard to brahmanas and saintly persons, then that can destroy our family for many generations. So I want to look again at these moral principles. Let's look at the principle of purity. Again, all societies value purity. You can see a biological basis for that. If you do impure things, you're going to get sick, right? But brahmanas are very important to ensure purity in society. Brahmanas are teaching spiritual purity. They're teaching mental and physical purity. Prabhupada talks about how traditionally brahmanas would be astrologers and physicians, and they would travel from door to door giving advice about one's past and future and advice about one's health. And if the brahmanas are in anxiety about their possessions, if they're always worried that someone's going to steal their possessions, it's hard for them to do this service. Right? Brahmanas are naturally very detached. They're not going to be like putting a lot of energy into taking care of their possessions. And the next one is authority. We can see there's also some biological basis for this. If people aren't trained to respect their parents, how are they going to live properly? If they're not trained to respect, like the government, how are the laws going to be followed? So also people need to be trained to accept spiritual authority of the brahmanas, because the brahmanas are giving people guidance as how to live properly. And if they're not given proper respect, if people think, well, I can just take their property whenever I want, or the government can take their property, then the whole guidance system breaks down. We have a society today where people do not respect scientists, intellectuals, religious leaders, medical professionals, correct? Right? And anybody can get on the internet and say anything about religion or philosophy or medicine, and that has as much weight as someone who's actually qualified. Right? We have a real breakdown in people's trust in brahmanas on every level. And if people think I can just take a brahmana's property, then they're not going to have proper respect, and the whole guidance system breaks down. Then fairness. So the concept of being satisfied with one's quota and not stealing. If anybody can steal from anybody, then the whole concept of fairness breaks down in society. And people then are not motivated to work. They're not motivated to do their duty. If people think, well, I'm going to do my duty and I'm going to work and my stuff can just be taken away, then people lose all their impetus for work. Now, fairness means respecting other people's quota, again, on all levels, which we will talk about, not just in terms of physical possessions. So then there's also a moral guidance of community, because we're social creatures, and without our community, we can't take care of ourselves properly. And especially in community, we need to take care of our members who are most vulnerable. Even from a selfish point of view, if there's not a standard of taking care of vulnerable members of society, then when I'm vulnerable, I'm not going to be taken care of, right? And all of us can become vulnerable at any time, correct? Just like when I was traveling, my finger got caught on a carving of a chair and bent, and I broke my hand. And for a couple months on my travels, my hand was in a cast. And that meant that I had to get help from other people. I couldn't do everything myself, especially in airports and on airplanes and like that. And I noticed that most people, not everyone, but most people have a mentality that we should take care of vulnerable members of a community. If I said, can you put my suitcase up here for me? Most people would be very helpful, because we're all going to need that sometimes. So why are brahmanas vulnerable members of society? Because they're very detached by nature. If we're looking at the 4 varnas, each varna has some attribute that is not possessed by the other varnas. So brahmanas are, metaphorically, they're kind of like sports commentators. They're not playing the game. They're just watching it and commenting on it. They're not deeply involved in the running of society. But this makes them somewhat vulnerable, because this detachment means also that they're not going to be that interested in getting possessions and protecting their possessions, and therefore they need special protection from others not to touch their possessions. Then harm. I don't want to be harmed. Anybody want to be harmed? Nobody wants to be harmed. So therefore we need a society where there's a principle that we don't harm others. It's the only way I'm going to be safe from harm is if that's a general principle. And without such moral principles, without respect for purity, without special respect for authority, without fairness, without respect for a community, without having a system of not harming others, then we're going to live in a constant state of fear. And when we're in a constant state of fear, our whole body and mind is under stress. When our body and mind is under stress physiologically, it's very difficult to think about higher subject matter. When we've been in a fearful situation, then our ability to think philosophically is compromised. Am I correct? Yes, that's even biologically, it's even chemically happens. So we don't want a place where people are living in a state of fear. In some places I travel to in the world, everybody's in a state of fear. Everybody has big walls in front of their buildings and, barbed wire and dogs and things like that. So one of the main items that is essential to maintain these moral principles is people trained to be satisfied with their quota. This should be true for everyone. To be satisfied with what I have achieved through honest endeavor. What I can achieve through honest endeavor. And honest endeavor would mean, number one, I'm acting according to my nature. As soon as I'm not acting according to my nature, then my work is intrinsically unethical, which we don't have time to explain in detail right now. But it is intrinsically unethical if I do other people's work, except for brief emergencies. And my work should be honest. I should be fairly representing my goods or services. I should be fairly compensating anyone who works for me. I should be doing work that has real value to society, not harm to society. I shouldn't be selling tobacco or alcohol or pornography like that. And I shouldn't be selling useless things or useless services. And then whatever I earn through that is my quota. Now, such is true even in subtle things. How much love and affection I get in society. How much time and energy that I have. What are my subtle attributes that I get also by living an honest life? And I should be satisfied with that. I mean, gambling, for example, is a good indicator of someone who's not satisfied, right? They're trying to get something by cheating. And the other, of course, what we're looking at today is trying to get something by stealing. Now, being satisfied by one's quota should be done by everyone in society, even if they're atheists. But it's part of our sadhana for Krishna, cultivating this satisfaction with our quota. And of course, the such is stated in the Ishopanishad, Ishyavashamidam sarvam, yat kincha jagat tam jagat, tena tvaktena bunjita madgudha kashasviddanam. Right? One should therefore accept only those things necessary for oneself, which are set aside as his quota, and should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. This is also a part of the Ten Commandments in the Bible, not to covet anything of your neighbors. I remember in Detroit, we used to bring all the children to the temple morning program as part of the Gurukula, so they had to go to the temple Bhagavatam class. And one of the speakers was quoting this statement from the Ten Commandments about what one should not covet from one's neighbor. And one of them is the word for donkey, but the other word for donkey. And so the children looked at me and they said, what? You shouldn't covet your neighbor's ASS. And they were all very confused by this statement. So I always remember that. But one should not covet anything that belongs to anyone else. One should not even have a desire for something that belongs to anyone else. And of course, Krishna also says something similar in the Bhagavad Gita in 4:22. He says, Adricha labha santushto. Santushta means to be satisfied. Dvandvaito vimatsaraha. Don't be envious. Give up enviousness. Sama siddha asirocha. Whether you have success or failure. Kritvapi na nibadhate. One who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who's free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Now also, if we're actually practicing Krishna consciousness, we should naturally be satisfied with our own quota. That should be one of the symptoms. If we look at the 26 qualities of a devotee, one is Maitra, which means friendly, And in the 11th canto, the BBT translation of this is never cheating anyone. Thus, one's being a real friend, right? If I'm a real friend to people, I don't want to take their property. Just like all of us have friends who we welcome into our home, correct? We'll let them stay in our home. We'll let them sleep in our home, where they'll have access to our possessions. Maybe we'll even let them drive our car, because we're trusting that they're not envious and they're not going to steal anything from us. So a real devotee is Maitra, and a real devotee is a Kinchana, which means without possessions, not claiming to possess anything. Even my own quota, even my own possessions, I see as belonging to Krishna. That I'm taking care of it on behalf of Krishna. What to speak of others' possessions? And I see Krishna's given them these other possessions. Now, what's very important, because I would like to assume that most of the people here don't steal the physical objects of others. I mean, New Goloka is a wonderful place in many regards, but one of them is that things don't get stolen here. It's extremely unusual for anything to get stolen here. I mean, it's so extreme that if you leave something here, it may be in that same spot a month later. Right? Of course, yesterday Guru Bhakta was telling me that if things are sitting around, she'll pick them up and put them in the lost and found. And she says after a month, she'll take them to the charity store. But I've noticed that. I mean, ever since we came in 1990, I noticed that people around, they just don't steal things. And that's not true everywhere. I mean, sometimes, frankly, you go to temples where you're always having to watch your stuff and always making sure that you can keep track of it because it might get stolen. Yes? But even if we say, well, this verse doesn't apply to me because I don't take other people's stuff. Other people's quota can also be subtle. What about other people's time? I mean, I've been in situations where, I've taught a class in the evening, and then by the time the class is over, it's 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Especially in the GCC countries, we don't even start the class till 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So then it's really, really late. And I've already answered questions, and then people come up to me and they say, can I ask you a question? And I'll say, I need to go to bed. And then they say one of the funniest things that I hear regularly, it's a very short question. And I always say, does that mean it can have a yes or no answer? And I'll say, I really need to go to bed. Oh, but I really need to ask you. I need to go to bed. But I need to ask you. The word in this verse is without having been given permission. Do I take people's time without their permission? It was really shocking to me when I realized that I was guilty of doing this kind of thing. Taking others' energy without their permission. Guilt-tripping people. Trying to guilt-trip or coerce people to give energy that they don't want to give. And I when I was traveling just recently, I heard people doing this. Oh, you should do this for me. You got to do this for Krishna. You got to do this. It's like, I don't really want to do that. And trying to pressure people. By the way, charity given under a sense of pressure or obligation is charity given in Rajagun. It doesn't even benefit people. At one temple I was visiting recently, there was a traveling group collecting donations for an ISKCON project. And they were doing this kind of thing. You have to give to this project. This is the most important project. Max out your credit cards. Krishna will take care of you. Don't worry. That's also trying to take people's possession. They're not willingly wanting to give that. Forcibly trying to take others' knowledge. Forcibly trying to take others' affection. That's a very common thing. Trying to coerce or pressure or insist that other people love us or that other people show their love for us in a particular way. Right? When you teach nonviolent communication, it's sort of the essence of that, isn't it? That you don't try to force people to give you something that they're not willing to give. That you can say to someone, I'm feeling hurt, or I'm feeling sad when you talk to me like that, or when you don't spend time with me. Would you be willing to? Would you be what? Would you be willing to spend time every evening for an hour reading the Shastra with me? And that you have to be willing to take a no. The person has to be allowed to say no. And if they say no, then you figure, I have to get my needs met in another way. And what does Krishna say? Nir yoga kshema atmavan. Don't be in anxiety for gain and safety, but be established in the self. Why? Yoga kshema vahamyaham. I'm going to fulfill all of your needs. If we're actually connected with Krishna, who is unlimited, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate, you can take the unlimited away from him. Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Still he is unlimited. Krishna says in the 5th chapter, we shouldn't be dependent on any other living being. Therefore, I shouldn't take anything from anybody that they're not really willing to give. Something my son Keshava told me years ago, which I found to be very helpful. He says, Mata, whenever anybody gives you something, you should always just immediately say, what do I owe you for this? Don't say, do I owe you anything for it? But say, what do I owe you for it? He said, in that way, if somebody wants to be paid for it, they won't be hesitant about it. And if someone says, no, you don't owe me anything for it, I'll always ask at least the second time. I'll say, are you sure? I'm happy to pay you for this. To make sure that whatever people are giving, they're giving willingly. Whatever they're giving willingly. That they want to give. That there's no kind of social coercion. There's no kind of indirect coercion. And I remember my husband, when he ran a business, he always had a principle. He said, pay people. He said, if you owe people money, you owe anybody something, give it to them before they have to ask for it. Otherwise, again, I'm stealing their time. I'm stealing their energy. If I'm meant to compensate somebody for something. I should never, ever take time, energy, care, knowledge, possessions, money, anything from somebody, unless they're giving it at least in sattva, unless they're giving it willingly, not under any kind of coercion. Now, let's say that we don't do this. Let's say that we don't respect other people's quota. I mean, respecting other people's quota means that I trust God. That I trust God, that whatever I need, I'm going to get. And I trust the system of universal management. I respect the laws of God. So if I don't do that, I'm messing up the whole fabric of this world. And therefore it can affect even my children and grandchildren, even 10 generations. So I was really wondering, well, how does this work? Well, first of all, we're all more motivated to do the right thing if it's going, or not do the wrong thing if it's going to affect other people that we love. Everyone's like that. Even criminals are like that. We all have people that we really care about. Like I might not care about diet and exercise for my own self, but I might care, well, I want to be healthy for the sake of my family. Am I correct? Right? If someone says, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to shoot you, I might say, okay. But if they say, if you don't do this, I'm going to shoot your kid, then it's going to be a whole different story. We're all more motivated by caring for others. So there's this universal law that if you don't respect others' quota, your children, your grandchildren are going to suffer. And if you take others' quota by force, 10 generations backwards and forwards will suffer. The more force we use to take someone's quota, the more suffering there's going to be for our family. By the way, such shows up statistically. If someone is a criminal, it's more likely that they're going to produce criminals in their family for generations. And if someone's an honest person, it's more likely they're going to have honest people in their family for generations. That's a statistical fact. One of the things I remember studying in graduate school. Who does well in school? Who's likely to become a criminal? who's likely to become sick, who's likely to get divorced. I mean, all these things are related to the family. They're related to what environment you grew up in, what community you grew up in. Now, you might say, well, how does this make sense karmically? Why should my grandson suffer from my bad behavior? That doesn't seem very fair. Well, first of all, they could knowingly be part of that enjoyment. If I'm stealing from others and my family know I'm stealing from others, and they're willingly enjoying that, then they also should get some of the suffering for that. That we have some collective, I'm not doing the stealing, but I'm enjoying that money, but I'm enjoying that thing. They may develop a sinful mentality by association. And we see this, that if parents don't respect others' quota on a gross or subtle level, the children and the grandchildren may grow up with the same mentality. Also, we can say that what family we take birth in is the result of our previous karma. So if in my previous lives I didn't respect others' quota, I'm taking birth in a family where they also don't respect others' quota. And therefore I get my suffering through that family, although really it's due to my own sinful activity. I can also get bad association, as we were studying on Balaram's appearance day, because I've committed offenses. So if I've offended devotees, that offense to devotees or to the Lord may put me in an evil family where they're thieves, either of subtle or gross things, and therefore I may also be affected by that mentality. So having a moral society is very important. Krishna consciousness is not dependent on morality, but having a moral society makes Krishna consciousness that much easier for people in general. And therefore, as part of our devotional practice, and as evidence that we're engaged in devotion, we should be satisfied with our own quota and respect others, never encroaching on others. What to speak of if those others are vulnerable? What to speak of if those others are devotees? What to speak of if those others are the ones giving guidance for society? And if we're not doing that, then we and those we love are going to suffer. And we're going to suffer way more than whatever so-called enjoyment we got from the theft. If I work to earn $20, let's say I get paid $20 an hour. So I spend 1 hour working, I get paid $20. That's my quota. If I steal $20 and I get arrested and I get put in jail, I'm suffering a lot more than that 1 hour of work. Correct? A lot more. So whatever benefits I get from stealing others' stuff or their time or their energy, I'm going to suffer a lot more than whatever so-called benefits I get out of that. But it's so easy to justify trying to take others' quota. I need it more than they do. I deserve it more than they do. I have an urgent crisis. I was telling one of my grandchildren who fusses about everything, she's 9. I said, if you're going to fuss about little things, then when there's really an urgent crisis, no one's going to listen to you. But we think like that. I can steal your time, I can steal your energy, I can demand your love, I can demand the use of your things because I deserve it, I need it, I'm going through some crisis. Or I would use it better than they're using it. And we can look for this kind of subtle mentality. I need it. I deserve it. I have something urgent. Therefore, I can take from you. Or therefore, I can try to manipulate you to do something that you're not really comfortable with. And when we say, amanina manadena, this also relates being satisfied with whatever I get and showing respect to everyone, respecting other people's things, respecting other people's time, respecting other people's energy, respecting other people's intelligence, respecting other people's affection, respecting other people's tastes. And then we can actually chant the holy name. That is a very practical measure of humility. So I'm trying to memorize this verse here. So I have to bring it with me so I can try to memorize it. Yad atra ska kilam kinchid vidvamsa purayantu tat tad atra sostavam kinchit tad gurur eva me nahi. Whatever was mistaken here, may the learned people please correct it. Whatever was nicely done belongs only to my Guru Janas and not to me. So if anybody has any corrections. Yes, Maharaj. Oh, good question. So gain that comes of its own, he said we should be satisfied with gains of its own accord. Does that mean that we should just lie down like a python in the forest? You can do that. That is possible to do that. But generally, Krishna wants us to work in the world according to our nature. So gain that comes of its own accord means I do my duty according to my nature. And then whatever comes naturally, honestly, because of that, I accept that. I don't go beyond my nature. I don't go beyond what's allotted to me, what Prabhupada will always call our prescribed duties according to my varna and ashram. And if I do that for Krishna and whatever Krishna gives me, that I accept. Is that all right? Yes, Maharaj.
Let's say I'm a mother and my kid is starving to death. And there's bread in there. The only way I could save my kid's life is to steal from the store.
Should I steal from the store to feed my child?
Yeah, to keep the kid. The kid is at the point of death.
The kid is going to die. Should I steal bread from the store? You could say that that's an emergency, but we have to be very careful because in certain cases there are emergencies that no rules apply to, but we should be very careful because our mind is very good at telling us that I have an emergency. There are actual emergencies, but we should be very careful because our mind is very good at convincing us that we have an emergency. Yes, but our mind is very good at convincing us that we can
sacrifice their life for their kids.
Encroach on others' property because we have an emergency. So we should be extremely careful.
What a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Oh my God.
Srila Prabhupada ki.